now listening to Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, a true crime podcast where cozy meets criminal, hosted by Jasmine C.L. Prince. Grab your yarn, pour up an iced coffee, let's sit through the chaos.
Never reached the poor. Instead, Sheila Dixon used them for herself and her staff. Girl. Investigators discovered that Dixon had gone on personal shopping sprees with a donated card. All right, everybody, welcome back to Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet. I am your host, Jasmine C.L. Prince, and this is the show where the stitches are tight, the coffee is cold, and the scandals, listen, they are messier than a Monday morning without caffeine. So, today we're kicking off our brand new series called Indicted While Elected, a political scandal deep dive featuring Black officials who went from history makers to headline breakers. And first up, we're heading to Baltimore, Maryland, where the city's very first Black woman mayor made history and then made the headlines for the absolute worst reasons. Sheila Dixon started as a teacher, worked her way through City Hall, and rose to the top, only to lose it all, y'all, over a $500 gift card scandal that had everybody in Baltimore, clutching their pearls or their Best Buy receipts. So grab your iced coffee. Today's flavor is the Mocha Misconduct. Fitting, right? Yeah. And get cozy with your crochet because we're about to unravel the rise, fall, and complicated legacy of Sheila Dixon, Baltimore's gift card grift queen. So, iced coffee of the week, like I said, is the Mocha Misconduct. So, before we dive into the story, let's sip on something a little too good to be legal. All right, so here is the recipe. 1 shot of espresso or 2 tablespoons of instant coffee, 1 cup of your milk of choice, 1 tablespoon chocolate syrup, 1 tablespoon brown sugar cinnamon syrup, ice to fill, and then you know how I'm always extra with my cold foam, and then a little dusting of cocoa powder. It is smooth, rich, and just shady enough. Perfect for today's dive into Baltimore's Mocha Misconduct queen. And then the crochet project of the week. Listen, y'all, I feel like every time I come back for another episode, I done switched my project up. So remember at the beginning of the season when I told y'all I was working on a granny square. I can't talk today, y'all. Jeez. A granny square sweater or cardigan for my husband, right? I wasn't really feeling it. Wasn't really giving what I needed it to get for him. So I kind of pushed it aside and I was working on other stuff, aka the Diva cardigan. But I finally found the top that I want to make for him. It is a crochet polo top with a collar. So I finally found a pattern for that. Of course, I'm going to share it with y'all where you can where you can go purchase the pattern if you want it. But I'm making it in the mocha stripes with the red heart yarn mocha stripes. And it's working up very well. The only thing that I didn't like about the pattern, is it's not very size inclusive. So I had to do some math to figure out my the pattern for his size that he needed, because she only went up to I think like an extra large or something. I don't know. She didn't go that far. So that's the only critique on it so far, but it's working out very well. I love how it looks. It's very clean. So when that's done, hopefully he'll let me post a picture with him in it. But that is what I'm working on. It uses a what stitch is it using? Double crochet is a stitch that it uses. So yeah, there's that. So whatever you're working on, it would be dope if you tagged me in it so I could see. So I am at Black Coffee Crime Crochet, Black Coffee Crime Crochet everywhere. So tag me in your projects. I would love to see them. All right. So there is that. There's nothing else. No more small talk. We're about to get into the story because it's kind of long, but listen, y'all, it's crazy. Baltimore, y'all okay over there? Because this whole month we are dealing with Baltimore exclusively. So y'all got some issues over there. But okay, so here we go. Sheila Ann Dixon's story starts in the heart of West Baltimore. Born on December 27, 1953, she was raised in the city's Ashburton neighborhood by a working class family. Her father was a car salesman and her mother was a homemaker, instilling in Dixon strong community values and a tireless work ethic. From an early age, Sheila was described as energetic and determined. Growing up during the tail end of segregation, Baltimore schools and parks were still legally segregated in her childhood. She witnessed the challenges Black families faced. These experiences forged her resolve to uplift her community. We love that for her. Education was Dixon's first pathway to service. She attended Baltimore City Public Schools and graduated from Northwestern High School. She then earned a bachelor's degree in early childhood education from Townsend University in 1976. In the years that followed, she balanced motherhood, raising two young children, Jasmine, love that name, and Joshua, and her career ambitions. Dixon worked as an elementary school teacher and as an adult instructor in the Head Start program, nurturing Baltimore's youth. Always striving for more impact, she pursued higher education, obtaining a master's degree in educational management from Johns Hopkins University in 1985. This advanced training would later inform her technocratic approach to city governance. Those who knew Dixon in her early years described her as driven, community-oriented, and unafraid to speak her mind. She was deeply involved in her church, the historic Bethel AME, known as a hub of Baltimore's Black leadership, and various civic boards. By her early 30s, Dixon's passion for public service was pulling her from the classroom toward politics. In 1986, at age 33, Sheila Dixon took her first steps into politics, winning a seat on the Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee. A year later, in 1987, she won election to Baltimore City Council from the 4th District, representing much of West Baltimore. It was a time of change in Baltimore politics. The city had elected its first African-American mayor, Clarence Dew Burns, only the year before. Dixon, one of few young Black women on the council, immediately set out to make her mark. She says, quote, "When I went around in my district and saw so many challenges, that was a driving force." She later said on her early determination. She gained a reputation for her righteous passion and willingness to challenge the status quo. This was vividly displayed in what became known as, quote, the shoe incident. In 1991, during a heated council debate on redistricting, Dixon grew infuriated at remarks she perceived as bigoted from a white colleague in a closed session. In a burst of anger, she removed one of her high-heeled shoes and pounded it on the desk, shouting, "You've been running things for the last 20 years. Now the shoe was on the other foot," end quote. The dramatic gesture, literally putting the shoe on the other foot, stunned the chamber. Dixon later admitted she had been tempted to do more. She says, quote, "I was so angry that I was going to take off my shoe and smack the colleague in the head," end quote. She told The Sun, but a fellow councilwoman stopped her and quote, said, quote, "That's when I banged the shoe on the table." The incident instantly branded Dixon in the public eye. Some were turned off, labeling her with the offensive angry Black woman stereotype. But for others, particularly in the Black community, that fiery display was refreshing, a sign of Dixon's genuine emotion and refusal to be silenced. She had a lot of emotion that she would just wear on her sleeve. There was something very refreshing about it. One longtime Baltimore journalist said, or it's quoted to have said, of Dixon's unvarnished style. Her unapologetic advocacy struck a chord with voters who felt unheard. As one observer noted, many saw her in, quote, a righteous passion that challenged the status quo, end quote. Dixon continued to build a record focusing on social issues close to her heart. On the council, she championed programs for children's health, pushing for better nutrition and exercise to combat childhood obesity, and advocated for the homeless and seniors. I think the politically correct term is unhoused now. Please don't cancel me. By 1999, her hard work and growing base of support propelled her to make history. That year, Sheila Dixon was elected city council president, the first African American woman to ever hold that post in Baltimore. She won re-election to the council presidency in 2004, proving her enduring appeal. Dixon's leadership style blended passion with policy know-how. She prided herself on mastering the mechanics of government. She says, quote, I began to learn city government, learn the budget process. I wanted to know how those things work so I could do my job even better, Dixon said, describing how she threw herself into the nitty-gritty of running a city. Colleagues noted that Dixon could be tough and even combative, but also diligent and effective. Quote, she grew into the job. She became more, mayoral. She listened a lot, end quote, recalled one high-ranking official, noting how Dixon matured as a leader over time. By the mid-2000s, she was widely seen as next in line for the mayor's office, even if a few detractors harbored old grudges from her fiery council days. On January 17th, 2007, Sheila Dixon's moment arrived. When Mayor Martin O'Malley left City Hall after being elected governor, Council President Dixon was sworn in as Baltimore's new mayor, the first woman ever to hold the position, and notably the first African-American woman to lead the city. It was a historic milestone that resonated beyond Baltimore. She wasn't the first Black female mayor in America, but she was the first to lead a city of Baltimore's size, which was over 600,000 people at the time. For Baltimore, a majority Black city with a legacy of Black male mayors, Dixon's ascent was a source of pride, especially for women, understandably. She later reflected that at her inauguration, she saw young girls watching her take the oath and knew she was opening doors. Quote, for the first time, they saw someone who looked like them leading our city, she said in an interview, emphasizing the importance of representation, as recalled by local media. Dixon quickly sought to turn that historic opportunity into tangible progress. In November 2007, she won election in her own right, earning a full 4-year term with a broad mandate. As mayor, she branded Baltimore with 3 words, smart, tough, strong, and promised to reclaim, revive, and rebuild this great city, end quote. Dixon's administration focused on public safety, neighborhood revitalization, and efficient city services. Her tenure saw the city's homicide rate drop to its lowest level in decades, even as overly aggressive policing tactics were curtailed. She had made a point of moving away from the zero-tolerance mass arrest policies of her predecessor, and Baltimore experienced a 20-year low in homicides under the steady leadership of Police Commissioner Frederick Bealsfield, whom Dixon championed despite political pressure. Community members noticed the difference. Quote, Sheila cleaned up the streets, end quote, an older woman later said, crediting Dixon for safer neighborhoods. Another supporter remarked that Dixon, quote, stopped the police from making illegal arrests, balancing law enforcement with fairness. Beyond crime and policing, Dixon racked up a series of policy achievements. So her achievements were cleaner and greener city. She introduced a single-stream recycling to make recycling easier for residents. Better transit. Dixon launched the free Charm City circulator circulator bus service, a popular downtown shuttle benefiting workers and tourists alike. Infrastructure blitz, her administration undertook, quote, Operation Orange Cone, revamping miles of crumbling city roads, tackling homelessness or the unhoused community. Please don't cancel me. The unhoused community. Under Dixon, Baltimore opened its first 24/7 emergency unhoused community shelter to serve the city's most vulnerable. And then fiscal management. She often touted that she kept the city's budget balanced and improved basic services like trash removal and housing code enforcement, which there's nothing, well, I don't want to say there's nothing worse, but it's difficult when you keep your stuff right and then the house next to you just got trash and cars and junk just everywhere. So good for her. But Dixon's hands-on management style, quote, she can't help but run things, as one observer noted. It started to pay dividends. After decades of population loss, Baltimore even saw a brief uptick in residents during this period. By 2008, some civic boosters felt the city was finally turning a corner. Dixon had grown from the rabble-rousing councilwoman with a shoe in her hand to a confident executive. A former media colleague observed that over time, quote, she became more, like I said, mayoral. She listened a lot. This quote I said earlier. And gave citizens a sense that she cared about their input. But even as Mayor Dixon earned praise for competent governance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Unbeknownst to many Baltimoreans cheering her on, a long-running state investigation was zeroing in on possible corruption at City Hall. Dixon's own history with a certain Baltimore developer and her handling of something as seemingly mundane as gift cards would soon unravel her career in spectacular fashion. So let's get into the scandal in City Hall, also known as the gift card scheme. In the late 2000s, whispers of ethical issues began to dog the Dixon administration. In fact, the Maryland State Prosecutor's Office had been investigating Dixon since 2006, while she was still city council president, for potential misconduct. Initially, investigators looked at relatively minor infractions. For example, Dixon had voted on city contracts that benefited her sister Janice's employer, and she had employed her close friend and campaign chairman on a city's salary without a contract. These allegations did not immediately result in charges, but they opened a Pandora's box. The probe kept digging and soon homed in on Dixon's relationships with city contractors and developers. What emerged was a pattern of Dixon using her position to enrich friends, family, and eventually herself. Investigative reporters later documented that as council president, Dixon steered no-bid contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to a former campaign aide and put her sister on the payroll until media exposure forced a retreat. But the most damning findings centered around Ronald H. Lipscomb, a prominent Baltimore developer with whom Dixon had a brief romance, and a slush fund of gift cards meant for the poor. Ron Lipscomb, married at the time, was a politically connected developer whose company sought lucrative tax breaks and deals from the city. He and Dixon began a secret personal relationship around 2003-2004. Ciao. Lipscomb lavished Dixon with expensive gifts, extravagant shopping trips to New York, designer shoes like Jimmy Choo's, luxury coats, and fine dining. He wine and dined her, child. In one instance, his company Dorcon even purchased a $2,000 gift certificate at a high-end furrier for Dixon, allowing her to pick out a lavish burnt umber mink coat in secret. And I'm gonna post a picture of her in that coat. It's lavish. Whew. The fur store was asked to not record the purchaser's or recipient's name to keep it hidden. Y'all knew y'all was doing wrong. You gonna ask them not to record it? Around the same time, Dixon, in her official capacity, voted to approve multi-million-dollar city tax incentives for a Lipscomb development project. The overlap of their personal affair and public business was a glaring conflict of interest, one that Dixon chose not to disclose. As she later acknowledged, her critical mistake was, quote, failing to disclose a personal relationship that influenced her decisions. Girl, that wasn't the critical mistake. The critical mistake was, okay, anyways. Perhaps more shocking to the public was the revelation of how Dixon handled charitable donations. Several Baltimore developers, including Lipscomb's firm Doricon and another developer, Patrick Turner, would give bundles of store gift cards to the mayor's office intended for distribution to needy families during the holidays. Under Mayor Dixon, dozens of these gift cards to retailers like Best Buy and Target never reached the poor. Instead, Sheila Dixon used them for herself and her staff. Girl. Investigators discovered that Dixon had gone on personal shopping sprees with the donated cards, buying electronics, video games, and other goodies for her own household. A search of her home in June 2008 turned up evidence: an Xbox console, PlayStation controllers, Nintendo games, and those luxury items from Lipscomb, mink and leather coats, designer shoes, a trove of gifts and purchases that painted a picture of illicit enrichment. Like, what do you need, an Xbox and a PlayStation and Nintendo? Like honestly, maybe a gamer need to tell me, because I don't understand the point of having all three. I guess different systems have different games, but seriously, you bought Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo? Okay. Anyways, that's not important to the story. That just seems excessive to me. But what ultimately brought Dixon down was the paper trail. In an almost unbelievable lapse, Dixon didn't even fully cover her tracks while spending the gift cards. At Best Buy, she dutifully gave the cashier her personal Best Buy rewards card, linking those charity gift card purchases to her own account. Girl, you clearly didn't think that through, at all. At Target, she sometimes supplemented the gift cards with her personal credit card, creating receipts that tied her name to the transactions. Once state prosecutors got wind of this misuse, it was, quote, relatively easy to track the dots, end quote, back to Dixon. One key witness was developer Patrick Turner, who testified that he genuinely believed the gift cards he donated were for poor families, which I don't believe him. Testimony that helped prosecutors prove Dixon had embezzled them for personal use. By early 2009, the investigation climaxed into a bombshell 12-count indictment against Mayor Dixon. The charges included felony theft, perjury, fraud, and misconduct in office. 5 of those accounts would later be dropped, but the rest proceeded to trial, airing all of Dixon's dirty laundry in public. The trial, which began in November 2009, riveted Baltimore. Residents learned lurid details of Dixon's romance with Lipscomb, a married man who squired the mayor on trips to New York and provided her with $4,000 worth of fur coats and other luxuries. They heard about the so-called gift card slush fund, a stash of charity gift cards from various businesses that Dixon controlled, ostensibly to help the needy, but in reality tapped her own benefit. The prosecution argued Dixon effectively sold her influence, trading city favors for personal gain over many years. As one op-ed later summarized, quote, "It wasn't just about the gift cards. Dixon's ethical, moral, and legal transgressions spanned a full decade. She had violated competitive bidding laws to steer contracts to cronies, used city staff for campaign work, and blatantly mixed love and politics in the Lipscomb affair. It painted a portrait of a politician who felt entitled to perks. Indeed, one journalist noted that Dixon's Achilles heel was a sense that, quote, I'm the mayor, I'm entitled to my driver, I'm entitled to my pay raise. And that she perhaps thought as a Black woman following generations of white male mayors, quote, I'm going to get mine, just like they did. Which, I mean, I can understand. I can understand. But sis, you didn't cover your tracks. You didn't, you're trying to play the same game, but you're not even, I don't know if she didn't know the rules. I don't know if she didn't, and I'm not trying to justify what she's doing. But if you're going to equate it to what the white men did before you have to understand that they are white men, okay? You're a Black woman. It's not even the same. You're not even on the same playing field. And you were sloppy with it when you did it. You got to be tight. Like, people will never probably fully understand or know what your predecessors did, but you just kind of did it again, like you were entitled to it and you were never going to get caught, or it didn't really matter when you're a Black woman. You had a target on your back the whole time. Let's get to the trial. In December 2009, the verdict came. A Baltimore jury acquitted Sheila Dixon of most serious charges, but found her guilty on one count of fraudulent misappropriation, essentially embezzling gift cards intended for charity. Like, yeah, you had to get that one. You had to. The value of the theft was small, about $500 worth of Target and Best Buy gift cards, but the symbolism was enormous. The mayor of Baltimore had stolen resources meant for poor children, which I think, like they said, it was a symbolism because it wasn't that much money, but it was for poor children. It wasn't for, I don't know what would have been an acceptable use of it, but you stole it from poor children. Like, and I think they said it was around the holidays, so this was supposed to be like for them for Christmas and stuff, I'm assuming. And you used it for yourself, for your household, when I'm pretty sure you could have bought it yourself. Like, come on, girl. Yeah, and what you wasn't getting out of that one. Dixon, who had spent a career championing the underprivileged, suddenly saw her name become synonymous with greed. Although Sheila Dixon was convicted on a single misdemeanor count of stealing gift cards intended for the city's poor, the damage was done, end quote, a CBS News reporter noted at the time. She faced the prospect of being forcibly removed from office under Maryland law, which bars officials convicted of corruption from serving. After the verdict, Dixon remained defiant in public, maintaining that she believed the gift cards in question were personal gifts from Lipscomb. Her attorneys argued that throughout the trial. Which, girl, come on now. You know that wasn't it. In reality, behind closed doors, a deal was in the works to resolve the remaining charges and determine her fate. With a second trial on 2 counts of perjury looming in March 2010 for her failure to report Lipscomb's gifts on financial disclosure forms, Dixon's lawyers and prosecutors hammered down a plea agreement. Facing the likely end of her political career, Dixon made a stark choice. She agreed to resign as mayor as part of the deal. On January 6, 2010, Sheila Dixon stood before the press and the people of Baltimore and formally announced she would step down. It was a stunning fall from grace for the city's first female mayor in just 3 years after just 3 years in office. Fighting back tears, Dixon addressed a live television audience. She says, quote, "It is with deep regret and sadness that I'm resigning as mayor," she said in a wavering voice. In an uncharacteristic moment of vulnerability, the typically tough Dixon began to cry. Quote, "I'm saddened not by the decision I made, but because I had a great staff who work hard, and I love the city, and I love the people of the city," end quote, she managed to say, as applause broke out in the room. The sight of Sheila Dixon, eyes wet, voice cracking, was something Baltimore had never seen before. A reporter in attendance noted it was, quote, "a rare show of emotion from the mayor. A woman with a black belt in martial arts sought sort of a tough chick," end quote. And I cannot talk today, y'all. And it engineered sympathy even among some critics. Dixon's stoic facade had finally cracked. The plea deal she accepted was lenient in some ways, but punitive in others. Dixon entered an outward plea to 1 count of perjury, meaning she did not admit guilt, but conceded the state had evidence to convict her. Under the deal, all criminal charges will be dropped after compliance, leaving her without a criminal record. She was sentenced to 4 years of probation unsupervised, 500 hours of community service, and a $45,000 donation to charity. Crucially, she was allowed to keep her city pension of $83,000 per year, a point that enraged some taxpayers. I mean, yeah, I might be upset about that too, because you're resigning and you got convicted, but you're allowed to keep 83. First of all, if you make it 83,000 a year, I don't understand why you took the gift cards in the first place. Clearly, you were not pressed for money. $83,000 as a mayor, and you and two children. Like, ma'am, what did you need them gift cards for? I'd probably be mad too if I lived in Baltimore. But on her end, that's a sweet deal. You don't have a criminal record, and you avoided jail, and you get to keep your $83,000 a year. Like, you set, you set, girl. Okay, so she got a sweet deal. But if I was a taxpayer in Baltimore, I would be enraged. Yeah. In exchange, Dixon agreed to resign from office on February 4th, 2010, and was barred from running for any city office for at least 2 years. She really got a good deal. Like, really. Essentially, Baltimore would be rid of Mayor Dixon, but she would avoid jail and eventually walk away legally clear. As part of the negotiations, her attorney had bluntly played hardball. If Dixon didn't get to keep her pension, they threatened she would remain mayor and tie the city up in appeals for years. To avert a protracted crisis of a convicted mayor clinging to office, prosecutors yielded. Quote, "Otherwise, Baltimore would have been stuck with a convicted thief running city office," end quote, one commenter observed of the deal. And so, at noon on February 4th, 2010, Sheila Dixon reluctantly vacated the mayor's seat. City Council President Stephanie Rawlings Blake was sworn in as the new mayor that day, assuring a smooth transition. Dixon's final act as mayor was tinged with bitterness and remorse. Notably, during her resignation remarks, she stopped short of a direct apology. When reporters pressed her about saying, "I'm sorry," Dixon's demeanor shifted. She became defiant again, simply acknowledging she had, quote, "disappointed herself, the citizens, and her staff," end quote, but not explicitly apologizing for wrongdoing. To many, it seemed Dixon still struggled to admit guilt, even as she bowed out in disgrace. Public reaction to Dixon's downfall was deeply divided. On one hand, there was anger and disappointment, a sense that she had betrayed the public's trust. Quote, "We shouldn't be saddled with a thief for mayor. You can't trust the things she says," end quote, said one disgusted resident when Dixon later hinted at a comeback. Editorial pages condemned her actions as a profound moral failing. Stealing from the poor is a hard sin to forgive. Yet, on the other hand, Dixon retained a well of goodwill in portions of the community. Some supporters saw the punishment as excessive for what they viewed as a small transgression, and they remembered her successes as mayor. This split in public sentiment will become very evident in the years ahead, which, okay, I don't see how they saw the punishment as excessive once this basically got off for free. She didn't have a criminal record. She got to keep her pension, and she didn't see the inside of jail at all. Like, how was that I mean, I know that the amount was $500. Maybe that's why they say it was too harsh. But again, it's the principle. You stole from needy children. I don't think the punishment was excessive at all. Like, in my opinion, it was a little light. They could have did a little bit more. But let's see. So, aftermath and community response. In the immediate aftermath of the scandal, Baltimore's mood was somber and somewhat surreal. The city had lost a promising leader to a self-inflicted wound. Community reactions often broke along lines of race and personal experience. Within Baltimore's Black community, many felt complicated emotions, which I understand. Embarrassment that one of their own had stumbled so publicly, but also a measure of sympathy. Seeing Dixon's tearful resignation, some longtime supporters were moved. Her display of emotion, quote, engineered sympathy for those who were her supporters, end quote, an NPR reporter noted, even as opponents saw it as too little too late. Callers to radio shows and letters to the editors showed a mix of fury and forgiveness. Quote, "I forgive her, but I don't forget," said one West Baltimore voter, encapsulating the conflicted feelings, willing to give Dixon another chance personally, yet mindful of her mistakes. Especially in predominantly African-American neighborhoods that had benefited from Dixon's policies, there was a narrative that, quote, "she did wrong, but she also did a lot of good." In fact, as time passed, a significant portion of Baltimoreans began to focus less on the scandal and more on the city's persistent problems. Dixon's successor, Mayor Rawlings Blake, faced her own challenges, most notably in 2015, unrest following Freddie Gray's death and police custody. And the mayor after that, Catherine Pugh, who we will get to, would resign in 2019 amid a corruption scandal of her own. In light of these events, some Baltimore residents started to reevaluate Sheila Dixon. Compared to the turmoil that followed, the riots, the surging murder rate, and yet another mayoral corruption case, Dixon's misdeeds began to look to some like a forgivable lapse. Quote, "People say she did a good job as mayor, except for that mistake," observed Malia Cromer, a local political scientist, noting a divide in public opinion. Quote, "There's a break between people who say the embezzlement is forgiven because she did such a good job and people who are just surprised that voters are willing to look past it," end quote. That divide often ran along racial lines. Baltimore is roughly 63% Black, 30% white, and in the Democratic primaries that decide the mayor, Black voters comprise an even larger share. Polling in later years showed that Black voters were far more willing to forgive Dixon than white voters. A decade after her resignation, 54% of Black Baltimore voters still viewed Dixon favorably, while only 15% of white voters did. Dixon herself spoke to this, arguing that African Americans understood the context and were more empathetic. Quote, I think sometimes African Americans are more forgiving and whites tend to be more judgmental, end quote, she observed in 2020. Whether that is broadly true or not, in Dixon's case, the racial gap in support was real. Many Black Baltimoreans remember the tangible improvements during her tenure: cleaner streets, lower crime, responsive leadership, and felt that one mistake shouldn't erase an entire legacy. Some even suspected that Dixon had been selectively prosecuted or treated more harshly because of who she was. Her lawyer had argued during the trial that the investigation was politically motivated by a Republican appointed prosecutor with a, quote, singular personal obsession to bring her down, though prosecutors vehemently denied any bias. Public protest against Dixon was relatively muted after her resignation. There were no loud demonstrations calling for her head since she had already stepped aside. Yet neither was there a groundswell of pity. Most understood that justice, however unpleasant, had been served. Dixon completed her community service quietly, often volunteering at food banks and mentoring programs out of the spotlight, and dutifully paid $45,000 to a local charity as ordered. Over the next few years, she largely stayed out of the headlines, working for a small nonprofit, the Maryland Minority Contractors Association, as a marketing director, and focusing on her family and church. Baltimore moved on, but it didn't forget Sheila Dixon. In barbershops and church basements, people would still debate her downfall. Was it a tragic mistake by an otherwise effective leader, or evidence that she never deserved the public's trust? As one bewildered voter put it, quote, we accept that she may have been a good mayor, but we're not sure she's a good person. Which, I can kind of see that. This lingering doubt hung over Dixon's reputation. Only time and her own actions could answer the questions of redemption. So, this is also interesting because she only had that 2-year ban, I think, on running for office. So she did attempt 3 comebacks in 2016, 2020, and 2024. So let's get into that. Sheila Dixon did not stay in political exile forever. Baltimore's, quote, fallen mayor became, in the ensuing years, a determined comeback kid, launching not 1, not 2, but 3 separate campaigns to reclaim the mayor's office she lost. Each run would test the public's capacity for forgiveness and Dixon's ability to confront her past. So in 2016, the attempted return. By 2015, Baltimore was at a crossroads. The city had been rocked by the April 2015 Freddie Gray unrest, and Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake announced she would not seek re-election. Sensing an opening, Dixon entered the 2016 mayoral race seeking vindication. Her pitch to voters was straightforward. I'm learning from my mistakes and I can lead Baltimore forward. She openly acknowledged her past in broad terms. Quote, clearly I disappointed people. I was embarrassed. I was devastated, Dixon said, describing her feelings about the scandal. But she urged voters to look at her record, promising that Baltimore needed her experienced leadership to heal. With crime spiking and trust in the city low, Dixon positioned herself as the steady hand the city missed. Many voters responded positively. By early 2016, she was considered the frontrunner in the crowded Democratic primary. Dixon's campaign was met with both enthusiastic support and fierce resistance. A coalition of critics mobilized to remind everyone of Gift Card Gate. A blog called Baltimore Rising sprang up to rally anti-Dixon sentiments, pointedly asking voters, quote, are you willing to bet the future of your family and the city on a candidate who is a convicted criminal? Is that a fair title because her record is clean. So is she a convicted criminal or not? Because she doesn't have a record. Interesting. A super PAC ominously named Clean Slate Baltimore flooded the airwaves with attack ads. In one blistering ad, an actor spoke as if directly to Dixon. Quote, "You put fur coats and expensive shoes above us. You cannot be mayor again." Which, yikes. Very straightforward and, yes, very direct to Dixon. Campaign literature even featured a fake mugshot of Dixon, hammering home the image of her as a criminal. Dixon handled these attacks with outward calm. Quote, "Of course, I've got to win people's trust back," she admitted. "Despite some of the negative things that have happened, we can heal," end quote. She ran on a robust platform, promising to raise the minimum wage, extend school hours, and reduce violent crime, essentially picking up where she left off. Girl, you had me until you said extend school hours. Like, school is already way longer than it needs to be. Like, what was your rationale for wanting to extend school hours? I'm not understanding that one. As a Democratic primary, the real contest in heavily Democratic Baltimore approached in April 2016, polls showed a tight race. Dixon's strongest rival was State Senator Catherine Pugh. In a field of a dozen candidates, the contest became a two-woman showdown. Pugh argued it was time to move forward, while Dixon argued only she had the know-how to fix Baltimore's problems. The final weeks were acrimonious. Dixon accused Pugh of ethical lapses in fundraising, which will be interesting when we get to Pugh's episode. Pugh's supporters blasted Dixon's corruption. One voter captured the sentiment of Dixon's detractors with blunt finality. Quote, "For me, it was anybody but Sheila. The corruption thing was just too much," end quote, which, dang, that's crazy. On primary night 2016, Baltimoreans were riveted. As votes rolled in, it became clear this would be a nail-biter. When the dust settled, Sheila Dixon narrowly lost to Catherine Pugh, 34% to 37%. Dixon had won a strong plurality of Black working-class districts, while Pugh carried other areas. Early voting, with higher turnout, tipped the balance to Pugh. In her concession at the downtown bar, Dixon stood flanked by her tearful children. Quote, "Now it's time to open up a new chapter in this city," she told supporters. "We need to build on what this campaign stood for. Love of the city, pride. I'm not through yet. We will make a difference." Despite the loss, Dixon's strong finish signaled that a large chunk of Baltimore had indeed forgiven her enough to almost return her to office. It was a bittersweet validation, close but not victory. 2020, second chance, second loss. In 2020, history oddly repeated itself. Mayor Catherine Pugh, ironically, had resigned in disgrace in 2019. Which I'm telling you, we're doing Catherine Pugh next week, so I'm not going to give too much away. But with the mayor's office open yet again, Dixon jumped into the 2020 race, framing herself as the candidate of proven experience in a city fed up with violence and corruption. By now, Baltimore's homicide rate has skyrocketed, and many residents nostalgically recall Dixon's era of lower crime. Her slogan could well have been, "Remember when things were better?" She frequently reminded voters that violent crime had declined during her tenure and boasted of the lowest crime rate in 25 years under her watch. Her campaign ads featured everyday citizens attesting, "Sheila Dixon is the best mayor we've ever had," end quote. Dixon bet that Baltimoreans' desire for competence and safety would outweigh lingering reservations about her past. Running against her was a younger generation of leaders, chief among them City Council President Brandon Scott, a 36-year-old reform-minded politician. The 2020 Democratic primary became a referendum. Return to the seasoned but tainted leadership of Dixon or opt for a new face in Scott. The race was again very close. It took nearly a week to count mail-in ballots. The election was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the end, Brandon Scott edged out Sheila Dixon by just 2 percentage points, 29.6% to 27.5%, in a 6-way race. Dixon had won more total votes than she did in 2016, but with so many candidates splitting the vote, it wasn't enough. She formally conceded after days of suspense. Even in defeat, 2020 proved the enduring loyalty of Dixon's base. She won most of the city's Black working-class neighborhoods, while Brandon Scott did well among younger voters and more progressive college-age voters. The Baltimore Sun described many voters being practically torn. Dixon's baggage versus her track record. Dixon herself continued to express contrition mixed with justification. I am sorry for the mistakes I made that brought my term to an end, she said at her 2020 campaign launch, vowing to work 3 times as hard to make up for them. Yet when asked to specify her wrongdoing, she would say, she would only say failing to disclose a personal relationship was her chief mistake. This careful phrasing, admitting an error of judgment, not disclosing her affair, rather than outright apologizing for theft, was Dixon's way of seeking forgiveness without fully owning criminal intent. It likely helped some fence-sitters trust her. As one older voter told Politico during the 2020 race, quote, "I've been in Baltimore my entire life, and Sheila Dixon is the best mayor we've ever had," end quote. So in 2024, she gave it one more try. Unbowed by 2 narrow defeats, Dixon announced yet another mayoral run in late 2023, aiming for the 2024 election. In a Baltimore Sun op-ed titled, quote, "I'm running for mayor and I'm sorry," Dixon formally apologized once more for her, quote, "past discretions," and confirmed her candidacy. This marked her 3rd bid to retake City Hall. At age 70, Dixon framed herself as an elder stateswoman who had learned hard lessons. Quote, "I have truly made mistakes in my personal life, one of which resulted in a misdemeanor charge that forced my resignation from the job I loved the most," end quote, she wrote. Adding, quote, "I let matters of the heart lead me astray once before. For that and the pain it caused my beloved Baltimore, I am truly sorry," end quote. In that poignant letter, Dixon acknowledged the toll of her scandal while highlighting that her conviction was a misdemeanor, not a felony, a point she stressed to mitigate the stigma. In the 2024 campaign pitted Dixon against incumbent Mayor Brandon Scott seeking a second term. Dixon's platform emphasized her classic themes: reducing crime, improving schools, and restoring accountability. Standing in a West Baltimore park at her announcement, a former dumping ground she had helped clean up, Dixon declared, quote, "I'm the most transparent person, the most trustworthy person, because when you make mistakes, you do everything to improve upon yourself," end quote. It was a bold claim, essentially arguing that her past sins made her more qualified now, not less. She pointed to ongoing struggles in Baltimore and argued she had the know-how to fix them, citing calls she still received from citizens needing help with city services. By this time, voters had heard Dixon's mea culpas and promises before. The question was, would 3rd time be the charm? The primary election in May 2024 showed that while Dixon remained a formidable figure, the city was ready to move on. Mayor Scott defeated her by a convincing margin, 51% to 41%. Dixon carried many of the same precedents as in prior races, but Scott's incumbency and improvements, a notable drop in homicides under his watch, gave him a broader coalition. A surprise to many observers was not that Dixon lost, but that the race even appeared close in polls. A mid-April poll has shown a near tie, suggesting Dixon's message still resonated strongly in parts of Baltimore. In the end, however, voters chose to, quote, stay the course rather than return to the past. Upon her defeat, Dixon left her election night event before conceding, waiting until mail-in ballots were counted. When it was clear she conceded, and Mayor Scott declared, quote, tonight you made it very clear that your democracy was not for sale, end quote. A pointed jab referencing a controversial super PAC that had supported Dixon's campaign. After 3 tries, Sheila Dixon's quest to regain her old job came up short. And honestly, after 3, and you're 70, just have a seat. Okay. So let's get into her legacy, race, and media. So Sheila Dixon's rise and fall is a complex chapter in Baltimore's modern history, one that illuminates how race, gender, and media framing can elevate a leader and just as swiftly tear them down. Her legacy prompts debate. Was she a corrupt politician who got what she deserved, or a capable mayor undone by one mistake and perhaps harsher scrutiny? Then race. As an African-American woman shattering glass ceilings, Dixon's race was both an asset in her rise and a factor in her downfall's perception. Her 2007 mayoral victory was celebrated as a milestone for Black Baltimore. She stood on the shoulders of trailblazers and became a role model herself. However, race also colored the public reaction to her scandal. Some in the Black community felt protective of Dixon, perceiving that Black leaders are often targeted or at least not given the same leeway that white leaders might receive. Indeed, Dixon herself implied a double standard, noting that white male politicians had long enjoyed perks and patronage. Quote, white guys have been having this for years. I'm going to get mine, end quote, she quipped, half justifying her sense of entitlement. That comment, reported by an anonymous insider, suggests Dixon believed she was only doing what others before her had done, though this doesn't excuse her actions. Moreover, the racial divide in voters' willingness to forgive, with Black voters far more forgiving, indicates that shared identity and community experience played a big role in how Dixon was judged. Many African Americans remembered the systemic inequalities and may have viewed Dixon's prosecution with some skepticism, a feeling that a powerful Black woman was brought down for something relatively small, a few $100s, while larger corruption often went unpunished with yes, absolutely yes. On the other hand, many white and some Black voters felt that Dixon reinforced negative stereotypes of corrupt city officials and needed to be held accountable to restore trust, which also yes. And then we have gender. As the first woman to lead Baltimore, Dixon carried the weight of representing all women in local politics. Her success proved that women could helm the city, and after her, Baltimore would in fact elect 2 more Black female mayors, Rawlings Blake and Pugh. But with the scandal, Dixon's gender may have influenced the narrative in subtle ways. Media and opponents highlighted those fur coats, designer shoes, and matters of the heart. The image of a woman mayor illicitly receiving fancy clothes and gifts fed into certain tropes, the ideal of a materialistic or emotionally driven woman rather than just a politician succumbing to greed like any other. The Clean Slate PAC ad explicitly scolded her for putting, quote, fur coats and expensive shoes above us, end quote, a line that struck some observers as playing into gendered caricature. A man in a corruption case might be accused of greed, but perhaps not with such focus on luxury items. Additionally, Dixon's affair with Ron Lipscomb added a soap opera element to the scandal. It was often phrased as, quote, she let her heart lead her astray, end quote, a framing Dixon herself used. This somewhat romanticized narrative that she was just blinded by a man she loved may have been a double-edged sword. It humanized her to a degree, making her mistakes seem like personal lapses in judgment, but it also underscored the notion that a woman's downfall came via a love interest, a cliche not lost on many. It's worth noting that Dixon's successor, Catherine Pugh, also a black woman, fell to a corruption scandal involving a self-enriching scheme, which, again, we're going to get into that next week, leading some to unfairly question women's leadership in the city. In truth, corruption knows no gender. Baltimore's history has examples of maleficence by men and women alike, but Dixon's case was irreversibly viewed through the lens of her being the first woman mayor and what that meant. Dixon also had to contend with being labeled an, quote, angry black woman, which that is a whole nother discussion, diatribe, tangent that we don't even have time to get into after the shoe incident, a stereotype rooted in both race and gender. She worked to soften that image over time, which she shouldn't even have had to do. She had to soften that image because y'all labeled her an angry black woman because she was passionate about her job. Like, come on. Anyways, and by many accounts succeeded in growing more measured and collaborative as mayor. But the early label was a reminder of how black women in power can face harsher judgments for displays of anger or assertiveness, traits often accepted, even expected in male leaders. So, cautionary tale. Today, Sheila Dixon's story is taught in Maryland political circles as a cautionary tale. It is the story of a barrier-breaking woman who rose from neighborhood activism to the city's highest office, only to have a career derailed by a few gift cards, as some wryly summarize it. But underlying that simple summary are some deeper issues explored above. The pressures on black female leaders, the temptations of power and entitlement, and the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. Dixon's trajectory also mirrors a pattern seen in Baltimore, a city that in the 2000s saw a succession of mayors embroiled in scandal or controversy, from Dixon's gift cards to Rawlings Blake's riot responses, challenges to Pugh's scandal. In each case, the public and media wrestled with balancing a leader's accomplishments against their failings. For Sheila Dixon, the final chapter of her legacy is still being written. As of 2025, she remains a polarizing figure. Many in Baltimore's black community still greet her warmly at church services and community events, remembering her as Mayor Sheila who got things done. Some even muse that if not for the one mistake, she might have been a transformational mayor for decades. Dixon herself hasn't ruled out staying involved in public life, though another run for office seems unlikely after 3 strikes. She continues to work with nonprofits and mentor young activists, trying to serve her city in ways that don't require elected office. In quiet moments, she has expressed remorse and a sense of personal growth. Quote, I let the people down, end quote, she admitted in one interview. Quote, but I've spent every day since trying to lift people up again, end quote, which is a quote from a 2023 radio interview reflecting her contrition and commitment to community service. Ultimately, Sheila Dixon's tale is one of rise, fall, and resilience. It's a tale of a trailblazer who climbed higher than anyone expected, only to fall victim to her own lapses in judgment. It's also the story of a community's complicated relationship with a leader who was both cherished and condemned. As Dixon herself wrote in her plea for another chance, quote, I hope the people realize that my love for the future of Baltimore outweighs the mistakes of my past, end quote. Time will be the judge of whether Baltimore agrees. So, whew. All right, y'all. You know the drill. It's time for Sip or Spill. So, here's your scenario. Sheila Dixon misused about $500 worth of charity gift cards, but she kept city services running, lowered crime, and actually made Baltimore feel like it was getting back on track. So, was the punishment fair, or was the public too quick to throw her whole legacy away? Sip if you think Sheila Dixon deserved more grace. She owned up, did her time, and still made Baltimore better while she was in office. Spill if you think trust is trust and you can't steal from the people and expect to get your seat back, no matter how small the dollar amount. Let me know on Threads or IG at Black Coffee Crime Crochet, because I want to hear what I have to say. I'm going to be reading your takes all week. Like, seriously, I am. So, that's it. We're going to wrap up today's Cozy Chaos, which, again, I'm kind of sad for Sheila Miss Dixon, because she honestly was a great mayor, and I would have loved to see what she could have done for the city had she not, gotten into the situation she did. Because, numbers and stats don't lie. She did a lot for it, and the older residents said that she was the best mayor that they ever had. So it's really a sad situation, especially when she almost won twice. That shows just how conflicted the mayor or the residents of Baltimore were with her and her whole legacy. So it's an interesting situation for her. But so that is the first episode of this series. We just sipped our way through Baltimore's biggest political facepalm, but trust me, we're literally just getting started. Next week, we are breaking down the Healthy Holly hustle, where another Baltimore mayor tried to sell children's books and ended up with federal charges instead of bestseller status. Yep, it gets worse before it gets better. But before we go, do me a huge favor. If you love today's episode, head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave me a 5-star review and tell the world why you're sipping with me every week. Your reviews really do help people find me, find the podcast. It pushes me out. So please do that. It helps me out. And also because now Spotify has started to put player counts on our shows. So right now, for me, it just shows less than 1,000 listens. It doesn't give the actual number because I don't have enough yet. So if you leave reviews for me, that helps people find me, and then I'll get more listens, and then my numbers will go up for more people to see. So that helps. Please also comment on the episodes, because I do read those and I respond. So I'm actually going to read a comment from Spotify and a review from Apple. So this one is from episode 2 from Schemist. I'm pretty sure I'm not saying that right, but it's SCCHEMIST. She says, why is she, this is the Ayana Bean episode. She said, why is she laughing? I wouldn't have been able to live without those checks. I wouldn't have been able to live without those checks because I was on my own. Imagine how many lives were ruined or life paths were changed. Exactly, because she was still in, the college students' refunds checks. I honestly wouldn't have been able to live without those checks either. Like, I was counting down the days until my refund check came in the mail. So yes, I'm with her on that. And then we're going to read a review. Okay, so this one. Okay, so this one says, It's 5 stars, amazing. I was totally enthralled with the story and totally loved Jasmine's personality. She was inviting, random, and humorous, saying all the things I was thinking. Thank you, Lady T. Davis. Love you. So please leave a 5-star review and a comment. I will read them. Also, now I have Patreon. So if you want to support the show, you can do so by joining. The lowest tier is $2 a month. Eventually, I will be building out the higher 2 levels where I have bonus exclusive content, bonus content. There it is. I'm working on my coffee break series on Patreon. Is exclusive for the top 2 tiers. Coffee break is going to be awesome. You don't want to miss it. I'm not going to fully give all of it now because I'm still building it out, but I'm telling you, a coffee break is going to be amazing. So, I think that's all for now. Yep, you know the drill. Stay cozy, stay caffeinated, and keep those gift cards locked up tight, all right? Bye!
Disclaimer. Great effort is made to ensure that all materials used in Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet adhere to fair use guidelines. No copyright infringement is intended. If you are the copyright owner or represent the owner of any material used in this content and have concerns about its use, please contact me and I will promptly address the issue.